Hello and welcome to Multifamily Elevated. My name's Suzanne Hobson, and I am super excited to talk to you about vision, people, and execution, and how you can utilize this information to elevate you and your team and your experience in multifamily. Brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, giving you the latest and greatest news and content across our multifamily sector. So let's jump in. Enjoy this episode of Multifamily Elevated and enjoy the climb.
So let's jump into this next episode on business frameworks. I'm so excited. I would love to introduce you to Scott Abbott, founder and CEO, business and executive coach, investor, board member, best-selling author. Scott likes to think of himself as an architect, builder, and custodian of prosperous companies, leadership, and growth. He has 30 plus years of credentialed experience and expertise launching, operating, buying, and selling great companies. He's a finalist for the E&Y Entrepreneur of the Year, Entrepreneur in Residence at IU Kelley School of Business, an Inc. 5000 winner, Fast Company Executive Board member, author of The Code Plus Factor, and the best-selling Level Up to Professional. Scott is the founder and visionary of Boss Up and Strategos, a founding investor in 90, a renowned business and executive coach, angel investor, and board member. Most of all, Scott loves helping good and caring people, along with his team-centric organizations, effectively learn, implement, and leverage the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines for exceptional leadership, management, and teamwork, and accountability in business, work, and life. Hello, and welcome to Multifamily Elevated, the podcast where we explore the many ways to grow and refine your multifamily business and beyond. I'm your host, Suzanne Hobson, founder of Here Elevate, where we specialize in helping companies and their teams unlock their full potential. All right, let's get to meeting Scott.
Hello, Scott. Why don't we just go ahead and jump right in? It's so good to see you this morning. How are you?
Good morning, Suzanne. I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Really, really good. I know you've been traveling around, as I have, meeting with companies and really digging in. And I'm just really happy that you were able to carve out some time for us to discuss something really important. And it's all around frameworks and business frameworks. And so thank you so much for taking the time out today to be with me.
Absolutely. It's always
really
fun
appreciate
to
it.
Talk about things you're passionate about and when you can help other people. So thank you for doing this and leading the way. Appreciate it.
I am really excited because this is something that I feel not only can it benefit multifamily on all levels, whether it's prop tech or our business partners or multifamily itself on the investment side or on the operations side. There are so many things about frameworks that can be utilized by not only owners and entrepreneurs, but also mid-level management, right? But a lot of people do not know that there are these frameworks and what they even are. And so you being the expert that I know on frameworks and with all of your experience, can you really give us a sense of what is a business operating system and what are these frameworks that we speak of?
Well, let's start with business operating system. I actually think a fun way to explain a business operating system is actually to invert those three words and go with it's a systemized way to operate a business. In other words, a lot of people more often than not tend to assume or presume that what they need to do, they're just going to do it and get it done. Guilty as charged. When I first started and still to this day, I'm not an expert always, and I'm not always at my best. And so the good thing about business operating systems and frameworks is it helps us to, for the most part, stay focused and aligned and cohesive and synergistic and accountable to what it is that we should be mindful of, whether it's the right goals, the production, the pursuit of the vision, the communication, the camaraderie, all those good things that very often we either take for granted or we hope are getting done. And thanks to frameworks and good business operating systems, it just gives us this trust but verify sense of confidence and assurance that if done right, the entire organization's on the same page. They agree to the same commitments. They are communicating, leading, managing, and being responsible to the right reasons for doing what they're doing. And so you just have this wonderful togetherness and teamwork and association that if you don't have good frameworks and a business operating system, I just don't see how you have that sense of confidence and awareness and togetherness without it. So that's hopefully maybe a bit of a summary.
But one of the things that I know we've talked about, and it's become, I don't know, I'm more aware of it, is that if you aren't really on, or you don't think you're on a business operating system, you really are. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that means?
Yeah, we have a little fun with this one, and that's that no system's a system. And the concept, and we have a term that we like in our world, the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines. And if you think about it, one of the concepts I happen to think that having a great company is like having a brick home. And a brick home has bricks, which I correlate to content and the tangibles. It has mortar. I call that the contextual, the nuance, the touch, the feel. And, then you obviously have all the things that are inside, the furnishings, the humans, the love, the home. And so together that makes it, what you ultimately get. And I think with regards to this concept of no system is a system, if you do what you do, but you don't know why you do it, in your own mind's eye, that's how you get things done. And that can work. I mean, I've seen companies that technically don't have a framework, technically don't have a BOS, a business operating system, can go for years, decades, in fact. But here's the problem. Sooner or later, that one person, and this happens a lot with privately held, owner-operated companies who between brute force and just the energy and the persona and the gifts that they have been able to carry the load and have had a good team. But there's one small problem with that model sooner or later. We're humans. And so, we talk about the 9 core competencies at Boss Up in 90. And one of those is, what is the plan for when you're no longer there? And it's not just to exit to make a bunch of money in theory. It's also to leave a legacy and to take care of the next generation and help people get to the next level of goodness in their career. So the whole idea is, if it's not tangible, if it's not written, if it's not, and we believe in the power of both technology and good old fashioned learning and guidance through books and guidebooks and curriculum based learnings and teaching. But if it's not in what we call a system of record, and it's not backed by technology and validation, then if we're being brutally candid, it's a bit of wishful thinking in theory. So yeah, it's got to be physical. It's got to be tangible. It's got to be, especially today in this hybrid work from anywhere virtual world, right? Even if there's not a physical manifestation of a system, but you're doing something that you're doing, you've got a system. It's just your version, right?
Right. I often talk about road rash and potholes because I think, just someone that's been on the planet for a minute, you might be able to feel me here. You've been here. You've been here a while. You've seen a lot of things. You've seen great things. You've seen some failures. And one of the things that I'm driven by is helping people reduce that road rash, right? And reduce those potholes, because there's some transparency into them coming, right? Like, they're coming. And I think for new entrepreneurs, startups, those that are really just getting in, how do you think these frameworks really help that group specifically?
Yeah, lovely. Well, I've always been a fan, and I think you are too. I don't just want leaders and managers and people of teamwork and accountability. I think we all should think of ourselves as coaches and mentors. Mm-hmm. Now, careful, not everybody's built to be one. I've seen a lot of coaches just say, hey, let's institute a coaching and mentorship program. And some people, just by the very nature of their DNA, aren't necessarily equipped or comfortable with that. But from a concept standpoint, it's pretty cool. And the idea is here, right? I mean, use that big word expert. I prefer specialist, right? I'm always in pursuit of learning and knowledge, and I'm never there. So I just prefer, specialist. But I think a concept I love is that thanks to experience and books and all these wonderful thought leaders, materials in the world that are out there, right? We could take that information and our own credentialed experience and provide that as insight to others. So it becomes foresight. Our hindsight can now be leveraged, right? So it's not only to avoid some of these potholes, because, mistakes actually create muscles that hopefully we avoid going forward. So now you have this wonderful duality of intentional awareness to avoid some mistakes, but also now you're helping other people scale up, get coached up, right? We have an expression, coach you up or coach you out. So you have this wonderful blend of upskilling and cross-skilling, and then you're also helping others beware of. And so good frameworks, good business operating systems, to your point, inevitably should have what we call the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines. They should inevitably incorporate what we call the 9 core competencies. And so they give you this guidance, if you will. Now, you should be able to custom tailor it to your product, your market, your focus in terms of how you want to grow, who you're selling to, what your unique values are, right? It should always be custom tailored. But for all intents and purposes, it should give you a lot of what, for the most part, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to make up. And I'm just going to say this, a lot of schools don't actually teach you, some of those more subtle elements about how to build, run, and scale great companies. Make sense? So yeah, I think to your point, and I know you love this part of your world, that coaching, that nurturing, that mentoring. And the good thing about frameworks and systems is, that should be in there up front as part of that template. Then you apply the individual experience and you have this wonderful blend of literal preset along with the contextual, nuanced, nurturing, mentoring that comes with it. And that's a wonderful combination.
Yeah, boy, I don't think I could have said that any better, really. I know that a lot of people that are in our audience, they come from all areas, all levels of multifamily and beyond. And what you hit on, I'd like to take just a slight turn here because I think it really applies and it will resonate, especially with leaders that are up and coming. The thing that you talked about was really that experience and how that is unique to the individual and how you can bring that into the relationship with maybe a team. And that really is what makes it unique. I talk to a lot of people that feel as new leaders apprehensive to use what is in their arsenal. They don't feel quite confident because maybe they haven't done the actual thing that they're guiding. How do you speak to that when, I'm not talking about imposter syndrome either. I'm just like, well, I haven't done that. So how do I really, connect and make sure that I can help this individual, even if I haven't done it?
Yeah, well, love the question. And at the risk of going all coachy, because I am a coach.
I know you are.
I believe in frameworks. And Isadora Sharp, the founder of Four Seasons, has a wonderful quote: systemize the predictable to humanize the exceptional. And I think I've always been a fan of the and both versus either or, right? Left brain, right brain, content and context, head and heart. And so I think to your point, and back to imposter syndrome and owning your truth, and leadership and management, and work and love, and profit and purpose. So to your point specifically, with new employees and older, and this dynamic around Z generations and this finger pointing and entitlement and can't we all get along? So there's a ground rule that I'm tempted to even say that I preach. Maybe I'm even an activist on, and I share it in session, and I might even write a book on it. But the ground rule is, let's be clear. And clear is both the word clear, because I think clarity is such a wonderful pursuit. Easier said than done, like keeping things simple, easier said than done. But clear is also an acronym, and it stands for collaborative, logical, empathetic, authentic, and resilient. And when you have a team come together that has diverse age, race, creed, gender, perspective, attitude, aptitude, credentials in a room trying to coordinate and align and achieve consensus, let's be brutally honest, you'll never get that. But if you agree to these principled ground rules and you have a good framework and a good BOS that establishes the criteria and the credentials, and you know what the quote unquote ground rules are, you can coalesce, right? There's a word that unfortunately all too often is seen as a bit of a pejorative, and it's not. It just gets a bad rap, and that word is compromise. I think compromise is seen as it's negative. It's not. Compromise is let's meet in the middle. Let's find balance. Let's find harmony. And to do so, it doesn't mean that it's got to be a win-lose. You can have a win-win, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be like this. It could be a little bit like this, right? And so today, because of some of the dynamics of social media and what we read in the papers, I'd say now more than ever, if we keep it, and let's be clear, and we know we've got 5 generations in the workforce, and you talk about what I love about your world of multifamily, in the communication world too, we call it omni-channel, right? People are consuming through a whole host of media. They're learning, they're working, they're developing. So your product, your market, your industry sector, if you will, is very much in alignment with actually how the rest of the world, in my opinion, should actually be working. I believe companies are multifaceted, if you will, in terms of the way that they're working today in as well as on the business itself, right? That's a concept, we love, in and on. So yeah, I just think it's a recognition and appreciation of the individual, certainly, but then we also have to respect and understand this mandate to be clear. And I think we all have to respect that. And if we do, and we play by those type of ground rules and principled agreements, things are going to be a little easier, a little better. And if back to just that understanding that we're not always going to walk out with everybody saying yippee-ki-yay. That's just life, right? We agree to disagree agreeably if we can. And as a leadership, if we make that decision, we do walk out and say we all agree to that, even though we may not have each individually gotten exactly what we wanted. That's what good teams do.
Yeah, you said something in particular that I've been talking about, thinking, internalizing, working on myself. And that is just really being simple and clear. And it is difficult sometimes. We have these we have hardwiring that we got from, ages 0 to 10, arguably 8 now, that has really changed or altered or filtered the way that we look at the world. And it's really hard sometimes to be simple. You'd think it would be simple to be simple, but it's really not. And I see that a lot in the companies that I work with, that we overcomplicate things. We just do. And I think one of the things that I've seen with business operating systems is that they can clear the air, right? It keeps you on track. It's a discipline, and it can supersede some of your own bad habits or just habits, good or bad, that can begin to infiltrate your way of thinking and, I guess, overcomplicate things, really.
But Suzanne, I feel compelled to jump in.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and having done it for a long time, I've walked into people's offices where they have 100 books on the bookshelf dedicated to the subject. And now it's, in my opinion, you've heard the expression, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And they have all the books on this, and they're trying, it's like the Matrix. They're swallowing a bunch of pills and ideas, and, so, as an individual who does a lot in the world of systems, all systems are flawed. Why? Because we have these things called humans, and us humans are flawed. And so you've heard of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And certainly I'm a fan of this little entity called 90. So we kind of think to ourselves, if you can imagine, if the Pareto principle is the pursuit of most frameworks and initiatives, right? 80% of what you're trying to get to gets achieved. And if you do it a little bit better than the others because you got a little bit better secret sauce and coaching and frameworks and the technology, you get up to 90. But keeping it real, right? If you hit 90% of your goals, 90% of your purpose, cause, passion, 90% of your market, 90% of your budget, 90% of your things that you want in this work business thing called life. My goodness. Mwah. How awesome is that, right? And so talk about simple, right? Winston Churchill has a wonderful quote that I've used often, right? You want me to write a paper, give me a day. You want me to write a page, give me a week. I was just in session this week, in fact, where we went into a quarterly. And in a quarterly, we're setting budgets, we're reviewing the past, looking in the quarter. It's a very intensive 8 to 10 hours. And to the team's credit, we called an audible. And because this concept of keeping things simple the time of the year, they had some complexity, they had some changes to the business and the market. But you know what the day turned into? It turned into what we call a quarterly conversation. And I gave the recommendation, everybody agreed. So we basically are chunking it into 2 parts. And it just became like this conversation jam. And it was glorious. And you know why we were able to do it? Because the business actually is running really well. And they've been on it, doing the work we've asked them to do for about 18, 20 months right now, right? And so when things are running good, and Jim Collins says magic happens when the spirit of entrepreneurship meets a culture of discipline. When you've got that stuff working, and I say to a bunch of owners, when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, back to the Pareto principle, 80% of your life can be in the world, 20% is in, right? And so when those things are cooking, you can do these fun, unique, audible type things. And so again, back to this conversation and what you're looking for, it's not easy, no. And anybody who tells you the opposite. On the other hand, if you've got, again, concepts, tools, and disciplines, you put those together, it can be easier. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Totally. Mm-hmm.
It's hard work, and more importantly, hopefully, it's smart work that you do to get to that point that makes it simpler and easier. So,
yeah, no, I love it, and thank you for that. I think it really gives some context and experience to what we're talking about. And this is it's a weird time. It just is. I know you and I have talked about this. The world is I don't know. Things seem to be going good. I do see some highlights happening and some enthusiasm about 2025 just because we're here. It happens every year, right? We can say goodbye to the 2024, whatever happened then, and we can really start to plan, the new year. But there's been, I think, just a lot of disturbances in the force, I guess is the best way to say it. And I feel that this year, people, while we're seeing markets open up, especially in real estate, and we're seeing some hiring, because we've experienced a lot of layoffs, as have many industries. There's still, there's still the unknown. And how do you really plan ahead in this time and, accurately? I know you can't be perfect about it, but annual planning is its own art form, I've found. And, before I knew about how to do it the right way, it was a crapshoot, really. It was just like people coming into the room, great intentions. We'd walk out of there. 2 people knew what we were going to do.
I think I like to sort of combine, as I said earlier, before, an end goal. So I think, doing what it is we need to do is an art and a science. And I think when it comes to the reality of today, I think that's what's required. I think it's head and heart. I think it's a blend of systems and mindfulness. I think it's teamwork and rigor. I mean, I don't think, and I'm turning 59 in a couple of weeks, so I'm blessed to have seen a few things and lived and worked all over the world and had a degree of success and absolutely failure. I've had a truckload of not so good experience and done a bunch of dumb things. But now more than ever, Suzanne, I would agree with you. I think because of socioeconomics, with regards to how companies come together and figure out how to plan and determine where they want to go, who they want to be, how they're going to get it done, especially given the dynamics of today. And there's no doubt that there are a lot of dynamics today. I mean, probably every generation, every group says times are difficult. But I've been around this earth for a while. I've been in business for 35 years. I think we can safely say that now is if not the most dynamic because of, again, the challenges and the opportunities in the world, socioeconomically, politically. You look at AI, there's a lot going on. The good news is, and I do believe this, and obviously I have an opinion based on a little bit of the world that I live in, I believe we do have tools, we do have frameworks, we do have a proven understanding about how business operating systems, when done right, can help us harness some of the most proven concepts, tools, and disciplines so that we can figure out who we want to be, where we want to go, how we get it done, and all of the elements with regard to leadership, management, teamwork, and accountability in ways that we couldn't have done before. And then again, back to AI and what that could do. So the ability to do things today has never been better. So yeah, you have this yin yang reality today. And so the beauty and the challenge, in my opinion, is, and what I'm really emphasizing to my clients and as a coach and as an investor and as a CEO and founder myself, is just the responsibility and the awesome reality of the end both, the head and the heart, the leadership and the management, the purpose and the production, the profit and community, the teamwork and the rigor. But to get from here to there, you got to realize that there's some big concepts, like everything matters. You can't read the label from inside the jar. You need help. And I do believe that if you are in a leadership position, you have a responsibility to do the best you can do to get it. I think you used that expression a little earlier today. And frankly, that's maybe where I'm a bit of a challenger. There's an assessment approach called Enneagram, and number 8's the challenger, guilty as charged. And
I'm an 8 too.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say it. I've gone on the record and I've said it in meetings. I've said it on stage, and I'll say it right now. If you are in that function and this is what you chose to do and this is what you're responsible for, and you're either being willfully ignorant, you're being whatever it is you're being, and you're not doing what you should do and you can, shame on you. And knowing that there are better ways to do better things and you're not doing it, shame on you. And I'm not saying that this way or that way is better or whatever, but at a minimum, you should at least learn, investigate, determine, and do what is best. Back to servant leadership, right? Versus being presumptive or assumptive or just saying, because that's not right. That's not fair. And if it's because you're being cheap or you're being arrogant or you're just being whatever, that stinks. There's my big technical term of the day. That just stinks. So
it does stink.
The world's very, it's messy and it's beautiful all at the same time. And that's the way I think it always has been before us and after us, hopefully. But certainly today, because of a lot of additional dynamics, and I think we all know what those are without having to name them, it's even more important today to be that much more of a responsible leader, to do the right thing as best you can, given your situation.
Totally agree. And you know, we talk in leadership circles about these things and how this next emerging group of leaders are just on fire and ready to do this, I think, better. And I'm excited about that group in particular. While they might not have a lot of that road rash or falling into the potholes, they certainly have an enthusiasm and a learning mentality that is really great. I was talking to somebody the other day, I won't give out names, but we were talking about the difference between a learning and a blame mentality. And I think this new group of emerging leaders are really not only cognizant of that, even though they don't have the road rash or the experience or have fallen into too many potholes yet. Yeah. So back to emerging leaders and really this mentality, this learning mentality is so exciting to see. We have associations just like every industry does. And one of the things that we, are always focusing on in our big department association grouping in June is learning, really capturing the trends of the time and dealing with technology, AI, whatever the challenges are right now in our businesses. And one of the things that I was talking to this person about was just the difference between a learning and blaming mentality. And, you can have a really great framework. I'll just say this, but if you've, I don't want to say allowed, but I think it's allowed people into your organization that you haven't run through the rules of engagement or maybe not a core value fit. Let's just say that. This is a big challenge for people right now. So I know we're kind of going off our line of questioning, but I'm really curious about your take on this. What's a quick, swift way to deal with that in your organization? If you're on the leadership team and you suspect, even maybe in a high performer, how can you really deal with that quickly in your organization? I think this is a real challenge for people.
So I've spent a lot of time in colleges. Sorry for the plug. I wrote a book for mostly college age students entering the workforce to help them with business centric life skills. So done a lot of time in those schools. And when I wrote it, that was first when the millennials were there. Now it's Gen Z, if you will. And I think I don't want to do a big finger pointing thing, but I actually, to your point, and I agree. I think quote unquote Gen Zs, the ones that are now entering the workforce versus millennials that are actually now up to 50 years old, are, I think, some of this finger pointing or this thing going on is not accurate. And I think a lot of, Ben Franklin, and I'm going to not quote this exactly, but he says something to the effect of, tell me and I hear, teach me and I learn, include me and I'll get it, I'll own it, I'll do it. And so this word inclusive got hijacked a little bit. And I love the word, but it kind of got used in ways that I think were pandering or pejorative or whatever, right? But include me. And I think thanks to, again, technology, thanks to, again, good frameworks, thanks to good systems, the ability to teach, learn, do, act, produce has never been more available. So why don't we do it? Well, there's a famous German scholar by the name of Goethe. A lot of people have heard one of his most known quotes, and that's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I don't know if that's always true, especially for certain young people. But one of his quotes that I do love, and it goes like this: it's hard to teach a man something new when he thinks his job depends on not knowing it.
Yeah.
And so in my experience, having worked with a lot of Fortune 1000 companies, large corporations and small and everything in between, damn these things called IQ and job ego and job insecurity. But there's a lot of people who don't want to pay it forward, who don't want to upskill and cross-skill and nurture the others, because they think if they do that, they're going to basically put themselves up for potentially showing that they're not as qualified, or this other person can come in, or all these things. And I get it on a short-minded basis, right? So there is a new model coming in, and even back to, I don't want to get political, but look what's going on in terms of the change of government and this new administration. I mean, change is inevitable, right? And change for the sake of change isn't necessarily popular. I think you should be doing two things at once: keep momentum and drive progress. It's not one or the other, it's and both, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, to the new generation coming in my opinion, for the most part, you got to have a trust but verify attitude. I think they do want to learn. I think they do want to apply. I think they do want to know what to do and why. And so that's a fair deal. And so I think the onus and the responsibility, and we say this all the time, if something doesn't work, that's on the owner, that's on the leader. And back to frameworks and business operating systems, right? What's the beauty about them is, when done right, it's a two-way street. And this is where I go back to what I said a little while ago. The reason why more often than not frameworks and business operating systems don't work is somebody at the head of the table doesn't want to do it. Typically, it's because of ego and insecurities and not invented here syndromes and fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and all of these factors. You with me? And then they end up pointing a finger and say, well, they won't do it. I don't think on average, you're right. That's not true. So it's a challenge, but it's also a wonderful opportunity. And this is where I think you got to have a little fun with it. This is job security, not job insecurity, because even though systems and AI and all these things are there, we still need humans. We still need us to help bring it together, and the contextual side, the nuance side, the touch, the tone, the smell. I don't know where actual robots are going to come in or what Elon's planning in terms of that side, but I still think we need us humans. And therein lies, again, I get it. It's there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, but as far as controlling the controllables go, we do need us humans.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a big fear, right? Especially for our frontline folks that are really the leaders of the customer experience, because they're the first touch. And there's a lot of fear of that. The technology will really make an impact. And I don't doubt that it will, but there's some things that you're talking about, that differential between great companies and amazing companies. And I think that human component is really, that's the secret sauce, right? Like, that's what's going to set you apart.
And I think again, if people are willing to check their ego and back to imposter syndrome, that's the beauty, back to the whole point of, I think, a big part of our conversation. Good frameworks, good business operating systems really do two things for us humans. Number one, it keeps us out of our own damn way because we're flawed. And so where we have shortcomings, where we have the inevitable misses, right? But also gives us the guidance that we may not have. And that's just one of those things that I think a lot of people, and I will go back to maybe, I'm just going to throw some of the institutional schools under the bus a little bit here. I think, just going to say it, some of the training that we do in schools is not necessarily based on the modern inclusive approach that I would like to see. I think there's a lot of, in addition to materials that should be broached even in high school, very candidly, before college, and then certainly in college if you're blessed to go to college. And I don't know if that piece of paper necessarily from an economic standpoint is, I think vocational schools and trade schools, I just think there's that did shift with COVID. But there again is the beauty of frameworks and business operating systems and books. But on the other hand, as I said a little while ago, I've also seen where people assume just by reading a bunch of books and applying a bunch of frameworks, it's like, you ever walk into a great kitchen and you got a spice rack with 45 spices, you put too many in, next thing you know, it tastes horrible and it's a mess, and that doesn't work either. So there's again, back to that art and science. You got to be careful about, how you do it.
Yeah, and the simplicity, I think, keeps just ringing in my head now. Thank you.
Yep.
Now I've got CLEAR, the acronym. Great.
I
love it.
Let's be clear. And that's not easy in and of itself. You can break down what's it take to be collaborative? What's it take to be logical? What's it take to be empathetic? What's it take to be authentic? And certainly the resiliency. And I think we all know in this world today, I love sensitivity and being conscientious and embracing your truth. But we also got to be, a little bit matter of fact that sometimes that can be taken to an extreme, that if, we do have work to do, right? And sometimes we just got to step in and do things. You with me? So yeah, all of those have their own, host of, we could do podcasts on all of those, but we don't have the time.
I know. I was just thinking about that. Boy, that's another hour. Yeah, to your point. One last thing, and well, maybe not one last thing, but one thing I'd like to jump into, because I think this really gives some concrete reality to what we're talking about. And this really has to do with your experience with companies that have utilized frameworks and have seen the success of that. Can you share any stories? I know you might not be able to say the company's name, but do you have any stories of where you've seen this just really make a huge impact? And on that is the speed to which you can reach these, achievements fast because of business operating systems in your mind?
Yes. I've been blessed and fortunate. I've coached and helped implement frameworks and business operating systems over the last decade in 145 companies personally, and in an indirect way, thousands. But over the last couple of years, very fortunately, because of the economy, I've had about 18 of my clients sell their companies for very successful exits. And I would tell you, what are the common characteristics of all of those? A willingness, an openness, an ability to, again, check the ego, to embrace the process, to believe, and then take believing with work ethic, the fusion of grace and grit. Again, this duality of intelligence and work ethic, vision with data, and just this duality of, I want to make a great company, but I want to have a good life. What's probably very gratifying to me is when I work with companies that very candidly, the owners didn't necessarily graduate from elite schools, let alone even went to college. I've worked with a lot of founders in the industrial sector, plumbing, roofing, HVAC, military veterans with PTSD who basically say, hey, I don't know what I don't know, but I know that I need help. I'd love to go from where I'm at to where I can envision I'd like to be. And I've heard, frameworks and and that stuff that, I've seen on the internet you do. And so again, I think it sounds cliche and, there's a lot of YouTube videos and TED Talks out there, but if you have the right I call it PAM. It's a chapter in my book, Level Up. If you have the right perspective, attitude, aptitude, and mindfulness, and you come ready to admit what you don't know, but you're willing to invest time and capital and believe with that sense of positive pragmatism, great things are going to happen. And I'm fortunate, I really am, to have worked with some wonderful people who embrace, again, the essential concepts, tools, and disciplines. And I guess I'd flip it, Suzanne, where I get frustrated, and I said this a little earlier, is because there's so much proof out there and validation, it makes me feel sad. And it makes me borderline want to be an activist and say, especially today, because there are programs and approaches that are, for the first time ever, incredibly affordable and effective. And you can now do this in ways that almost anybody can do it. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And that's the bummer. So yeah, I would say, and on the flip, where doesn't it work? Well, I've never been fired from any of my engagements, but I have fired 3 companies. And where that happens is the inverse of what I said. When individuals have an arrogance, a entitlement, and a belief that they're above, and they don't follow and prescribe to the inverted servant leadership type attitude. They think this is a means to the end and they can just phone it in. They don't truly believe. You've heard the expression putting lipstick on a pig. They're doing it just to sell the company, or it's a startup that says, I'm just doing it to make believe, right? We use the concept filtering a lot in our world. And I've been doing this long enough that between my spidey senses and my sixth senses and our literal filters, some of our tools, you can see that pretty early on. And that's when I just basically say, hey, I don't think this is a fit. Probably best to use your time and your resources in another way. But yeah, I mean, the joke is, why do 4 out of 5 dentists say, don't you? It just makes you wonder why people still drive without a seatbelt, or why people do dumb things in life when you don't have to. You with me?
I am. Well, I know I could take even more of your time up because this is all just so fascinating. And I might have you back if you would be willing to come back. Would be great. But how can people reach you, Scott, if they want to know more about business operating systems, or just want to pick your brain, or can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So many ways. Probably the 2 that are most on the just Scott in general, LinkedIn, and being a bit of I've been accused of being a bit on this thing called the interwebs, the socials. So at Scott Abbott ABC, the ABC stands for Architect, Builder, Custodian. It's kind of, I coach and encourage people to think about themselves in a more purposeful fashion. So I think of myself as an architect, builder, custodian of prosperous companies, leadership, and growth. So Scott Abbott ABC, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and even my .com. So scottabottabc.com. And also have some, if I may, some pretty cool stuff, especially this time of year, for journaling. So I'm a big fan of journaling. So if you go to that, you can download a wonderful framework for journaling with some questions and some prep. Also have a podcast out there that 85 episodes, Moments of Momentum. Much like yours. Thank you, Suzanne. Just conversations with other leaders about gems and nuggets, moments in their lives that have inspired and lessons learned. So yeah, those are probably the in the cloud places to go to. There you have it. Thank you for having me, by the way, Suzanne. And again, back to what you're doing in your world. Love it. Big fan. Bringing the goodness that you and your group are doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Scott. All right. Until next time.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Multifamily Elevated, where we hope that you are inspired and ready to go, elevated to take on your next challenge in multifamily. So if you liked this episode, please subscribe, like, comment, and of course, share with your network. And don't forget that this was brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, that is also sharing the latest and greatest in trends, ideas, and content across our multifamily space. Until next time, keep elevating, and we'll talk soon.